some random person wrote a biography of me and published it on Amazon. It's got a goofy AI generated picture of me. And then it says I went to law school and I'm a divorce lawyer, and it has some other things that are basically correct. And a bunch of things that are completely made up, like the fact that I'm into like cooking. I'm into eating cooking. I'm into culinary delights in terms of eating them. I will not make them. So yeah, that happened. Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the I Just Want This Done podcast. With me as always, the amazing Rahul Iyer at Chicago Divorce. How are you?
Doing well. It's middle of October and it's 60 degrees outside and sunny in Chicago. Can't complain.
Fun fact, not because it's actually windy because of our politicians. For those of you interested in Chicago history. Also, Chicago Fire Academy, located right where Mrs. O'Leary's cow allegedly kicked over the lantern to start the Chicago fire. So let's get rocking and rolling into this show. We're live streaming today on the Riverside.fm platform and on X. Hey to all of those followers on X, the artist formerly known as Twitter. We are coming at you with our divorce podcast. I'm Rayford Dalton Palmer. The divorce lawyer is so great, his mom gave him 3 names, and the managing partner of STG Divorce Law in Chicago, and Rahul is one of my partners. And we bring this show to you to talk about celebrity divorces, wealthy people getting divorced, engagements, dating news, and we talk about real divorce issues too. We try to make it fun and interesting, not boring like all those other divorce podcasts where they talk about alimony for an hour. That would make us want to jump off a bridge, and we don't want that. So we want to talk about things that are interesting to us because they'll be interesting to you. So without delaying this further, let's go. First, we're going to talk about Cardi B's and Offset's divorce. This is interesting because Offset, there's several points that are interesting about this story. They're not divorced yet. The case has been proceeding for a while. They've been on and off since 2017. They have 3 kids. Cardi B has much higher net worth than Offset, apparently. This is reported in People Magazine or People Online. And all the links in the show notes, as always, so you can see the stories yourself. So she says that she and Offset haven't finalized divorce for financial reasons. And apparently they haven't worked out some tax issues. And she talked in late September about issues about why the marriage is still going on. She is pregnant with the child from her boyfriend right now, kind of obliquely. She said, somebody wants me to pay for their taxes. I'm guessing Cardi's going to have to pay more of a share of the taxes than she wants to because she was married to Offset. So her quote was, the only way I can get out of my marriage is if I pay for somebody else's taxes, even though I pay for my own and give them one of my properties, obviously alluding to the settlement. So she's not happy about that, obviously. So it sounds like that what's hanging up the deal is they just can't agree on the settlement yet. They were dating in 2017, married the same year, and had an on and off relationship. And Offset, of course, famous for that song, I Like It. And so a couple of details that are interesting in this case. Offset admits to stepping out during the marriage. And what was interesting was there were allegations of infidelity on her part in the press. And now he said that he stepped out during the marriage. This report from E! News Online published in about a week ago. And his quote was, I should have respected her way more. You know what I mean? He was talking in a podcast to Keke Palmer, no relation. And he said, I made bad decisions as a man, like stepping out. Okay. Now, in some states, that's not a problem admitting that. But in some states, that can get you in huge, huge trouble because it has legal impact on the outcome of your case. So you got to be careful where you are and where you say these things because they can go on forever. And we'll repeat that theme shortly with another story. So he talked about that and he said, that's why when she left, I had to take that on the chin. He said I was being selfish. This report is by hot100.9.com. Okay, it's not exactly Wall Street Journal, but they published it. Rumors are swirling that Cardi B agreed to divorce settlement, giving Offset a major financial win, including millions in spousal support. We don't know. And a 70-30 asset split in his favor. Now, Rahul, why that's interesting is people might be shocked by just, 70-30, that sounds ridiculous. What they don't know is the division of marital assets can be heavily impacted by the non-marital assets, or in this case, non-community or separate property owned by the parties, right?
Exactly.
We have cases like this where one party might have a huge non-marital estate, many, many millions, and that's property they own personally that they inherited or whatever, owned before the marriage. And the marital property might be much less. So let's say the marital property is $1 million and the non-marital property one person has is $20 million. A court might decide that it's equitable to give the person with less money more than half of the marital estate. So this is when people say, oh, it's always 50-50. No, It's not always
No,
50-50.
it's not.
Many times it is, but not always. So this is where this kind of comes into place. This might sound shocking to Cardi's fans. And her quote about paying taxes and giving away a home indicates there's something going on here that may lend some credibility to this, meaning she's not thrilled about the settlement. And with her having a lot more money than he does, I'm not shocked that there would be an unequal division of assets if that isn't in fact the case. Spousal support, don't know about that. That's kind of a different ballgame, because when somebody's making a substantial amount of money, and I'm guessing Offset's not hurting by anybody's normal standards, then there'd be an argument that he doesn't need additional support. You get you get in that lifestyle argument. So interesting articles. There's 3 articles I'm citing here about this stuff that will be in the show notes. But moving on, so just interesting how what we see in the press doesn't accurately reflect reality, or you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And it may be a lot more fair than it seems, although it doesn't feel very fair to Cardi B, I'm sure, if the split is tilted like this. And we always talk about fair being that 4-letter F word in negotiations.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And what we're really talking about is what's reasonable to the people. And then comparing it to what you could expect at a trial. Your only other option is going to trial. There's no third option. So tell us about Gwyneth and conscious uncoupling.
There's this article here in the times.com where Gwyneth Paltrow talks about how she wants to write a book on conscious uncoupling. And really, this kind of stems, this is an interview that she had recently where she expressed how Amy Odell wrote a quote unquote unauthorized biography about her, which she claims was, she meaning Gwyneth, claims was poorly written, sexist, and she denied claims of toxic culture at Goop, which I'm sure this book probably leaned into. So she definitely addressed how she hadn't read this novel, this biography, and how she's like, I should probably write a book on what conscious uncoupling, and really just tries to sort of maintain this dignified silence without really addressing it. She was just waiting for British Vogue, I guess, to pitch it up at the house in the Hamptons, according to what the article says. But she says she hasn't read the book. Her husband had flicked through it, she said. And she said, why do men get someone like Walter Isaacson, who was Elon Musk's biographer? And she says, and I get this hack, in her words.
Well, it sounds like the hack just wrote an unauthorized thing.
Right. You had an unauthorized biography of yourself, didn't you, Ray?
It's funny. Before the show, we talked about that, and I forgot all about it. Some random person wrote a biography of me and published it on Amazon. And my publicist actually told me about it. And she said, there's a book about you out there in Amazon. I said, wait a second, are you kidding me? And sure enough, there is. It's got a goofy AI generated picture of me, and it's filled with AI generated silliness. The only thing that's right, I think, is my birthday. And then it says I went to law school and I'm a divorce lawyer, and it has some other things that are basically correct, and a bunch of things that are completely made up, like the fact that I'm into like cooking, which I found hilarious. I'm into eating cooking. I'm into culinary delights in terms of eating them. I will not make them. So that my wife thought that was hilarious. So yeah, that happened. But Gwyneth says she's interested in writing a book. And they also said some comments in this book. They want to give Gwyneth a shot. I mean, it's like,
right.
She's kind of the celeb that for some reason reporters and other people kind of love to hate her for some reason. I'm not really sure why she attracts that negativity. The Goop, which was like her brand. There are quotes in the book that Goop was chaotic, and Paltrow would scold her underlings for replying to her emails with the words on it. A waste of her time. She simply assumed they were on it. Well, I feel the same way. Don't answer an email saying, I'm doing it. I assume you're doing it. It seems like kind of petty stuff, but in somebody trying to trade on her, make some money on her name. And that's not the first time that's happened. But Gwyneth, if you want to write a book about conscious uncoupling, I would love to co-author this thing with you and get my good friend Joshua Lysick to assist, because this book would be a killer, especially because you were the one, you kind of invented it. And there's a book entitled Conscious Uncoupling that has been out there since 2016. And I don't know if you took the name from them or Catherine Thomas took the name from you. I'm not sure, but it seems to have worked for you. And people like to know how celebrities make it work. And so I'm here to help. The mindset's in line with the things I espouse in my book too.
And for those that don't know, conscious uncoupling is basically a term for ending a relationship in a way that's respectful, compassionate, and mindful of both people, particularly, when kids are involved in the dynamic. So, focusing on self-reflection, responsibility, avoiding blame, etc.
And that's really important. And we recommend that always is keep the kids first. And back at that time, Gwyneth was talking about how I think she'd said she'd read the book because the book came out in 2016. I don't recall for sure.
Or I think she coined it in 2014 or something to that effect, I think, around that time.
She might as well come out with the book because, first of all, she could tell her own story correctly and come out and do an autobiography with a ghostwriter. And secondly, a book about the conscious uncoupling process and how it's worked for you and what your recommendations are from your personal experience. I think that'd be a big seller. So,
oh yeah,
we're here for it. And next up is Scott Wolf and Kelly. The divorce itself is ongoing. And the thing that's significant about it is she's, I guess, in a mental health facility. They're estranged currently. They were married in 2004, split in June 2025 after 21 years of marriage. Apparently, she's in a mental health facility, and he posted a message giving her birthday wishes. And she's the mother of his 3 kids. So he wished her happy birthday. And apparently, their issues had been very public about trouble in their relationship. Law enforcement's had to intervene. In August, she was arrested for doxing him. She was charged with misdemeanors of electronic disclosure of personal information. You can't publish that stuff in public, folks. That's a crime. And she has had alcohol, I guess, and substance abuse issues reportedly in these stories. Scott was granted temporary sole custody of the kids. She was ordered to have no contact with the children. So a difficult situation, and hopefully treatment will help her get straightened out and take care of her kids the way that she wants to. Nobody loves being in these situations. And, it's a disease, and I wish her all the best for the sake of herself and their family. So that's going on, but I thought it was nice of him to post that message. That's a good message for the kids to see, that he's still... You're not kicking somebody when they're down. You're taking the high road, and that's always a way to go. So good on Scott Wolf for doing that. So tell us about Gary Owen. I didn't know Gary, but I came across this story because we search for celebrity, divorce news and things like that. And we look for things that have relevance to our audience's lives and also where the press sort of gets these divorce things wrong. Tell us about this one.
Yeah, so Gary Owen is a comedian, and he was married to Kenya Duke. And recently, I think people are typically familiar with the comedian Andrew Schultz, who's got a show and a podcast, and obviously his stand-up routine and everything. So Andrew, I guess, had Gary Owen on his show about a year or so ago. So he just came back on the show and said, I guess Andrew had asked him at a prior appearance on the show where he said, he'd been happily married for 16 years. And then Schultz, as a comedian may, asked him, quote unquote, how many of those years he had been faithful. Gary Owen choked on his drink and laughed it off without answering. So he didn't really say anything, but I guess maybe the appearance would have been an implication that he might not have been. And so he says then in this most recent show, he came back and said, that came to haunt him. He says, that came up in court, bro. That came up in court, Owen revealed, according to this bet.com article. He said, we settled, but it came up in court. So I guess Kenya Duke had brought the tape of this video clip during one of the hearings as quote unquote evidence. Evidence of what? I'm not really sure, insofar as perhaps the state had some, I guess, one of the factors for assessing maintenance might have been fidelity or infidelity or conduct or misconduct during a marriage, etc. I don't know. Again, it depends. But
I just looked it up. Their divorce is filed in Ohio. And I don't know how Ohio divorce law works. But remember, we've talked about this before. Infidelity, aside from being a big deal morally, depending on your state, could be a big deal financially. This ties into a number of themes we talk about on the show. The one being, be careful when you put something out there in social media, in this case on a podcast, where this stuff can come back to haunt you. And in this case, Gary said, hey, this thing I laughed off on this podcast came up in court. And you can be sure that if you're a celebrity, for certainly, and we look up stuff. We Google our names of parties on the internet to see if we find anything interesting. And in this case, if it's a celebrity, you bet you're going to look through other media and information to try to find something that might be useful in the divorce case. So he's saying, hey, this came back to haunt me. Well, it doesn't say what the impact was. The quote was, he looked visibly uncomfortable when he said that came up in court, bro.
yeah, exactly.
So not smooth for him. But anyway, we don't know the real details of the divorce itself. It looks like the divorce was filed in 2022 after 18 years. It was a highly public, contentious divorce with a lot of court action. Filed originally in California in 2021. Owen then filed in Ohio, and that became an issue because it had multi-state litigation. Apparently, Ohio was financially more advantageous for Owen versus California. Very interesting. So that's the scoop on that one. So the next thing I want to talk about is legal topic today. A little bit about collaborative divorce. And tomorrow I'm speaking in front of Collaborative Practice California. I'm doing the keynote for their weekend continuing ed program for divorce coaches, attorneys, and financial professionals who do collaborative. And we've talked about collaborative a bit on the podcast before. And collaborative is an alternative dispute resolution method really invented by a lawyer named Stu Webb in Minneapolis in the 1990s. And Stu was a veteran divorce lawyer who was sick of all the fighting in court. Famously wrote a letter to a judge friend of his and said, hey, would you be willing to negotiate these cases with me? Mediation doesn't seem to work all the time on these more complex cases, and the mediator can't give legal advice. What if we both acted kind of like a mediator and a lawyer at the same time, and we could sort of work around that issue? And then we also have the problem the mediator can't draft a settlement agreement. And there's these ethics issues where the mediator's got to be neutral. But what if we take mediation principles and apply it to negotiation and agree to stay out of court? And he outlined it in 9 points in a letter that's kind of become famous in our world. It became the basis for collaborative practice. And one of the real distinct things he talks about in his book and is the foundation of collaborative is the participation agreement. The parties sign an agreement with the lawyers that talks about confidentiality and how people being upfront about producing information and honest about that information and cooperative. But one of the key parts about it is it says, if either party goes to court, the attorneys are fired. And the whole rationale behind that Stu thought about was aligning the financial incentives of the lawyers with the parties. Because what happens if court gets worse in a traditional divorce case? Theoretically, if World War III happens, that's just good for the lawyers because they make more money. We like to think that's not how lawyers operate, but there is a financial incentive theoretically for a case to keep going. Now, I would suggest that cases that go on for a long time make clients very unhappy. And so there's a real disincentive. It makes for bad reviews on Google and clients aren't happy. So I don't think that's entirely true, but I understand the concept. And I know clients certainly do. And their fear is that the lawyers run away with these cases. I would submit to you, it's more of a combination of clients getting emotional, lawyers not steering them away from emotions, not because lawyers are evil, but because lawyers just kind of churn away and do what their clients tell them more often than not. And I don't think there's enough education out there. And people get emotional and don't do a cost-benefit analysis on their cases. And this is all in my book. And they end up in a war that they didn't want. And when they're all done, they realize it was a Pyrrhic victory. It wasn't worth, the juice wasn't worth the squeeze, you know?
Right.
So in collaborative, the mindset is solid. It's like, okay, we're going to work together. We're going to use other professionals to help. These include divorce coaches, which are mental health professionals trained in collaborative. They help everybody communicate. They help people understand what's going on with their children. They help them talk with each other about tough issues, like maybe there's infidelity. They help the clients understand the lawyers. They help when the lawyers don't get along with each other. The coaches can be really, really useful, especially in a contentious case, to calm the waters and get people to get along. And I'll give an example of a coach being successful in a case. I had a case where I represented a woman where infidelity was very fresh. She caught him cheating. She wanted to get divorced immediately. We went into a collaborative process and they had divorce coaches, and the coaches would work with them about the affair and help her process her emotions and help him kind of behave better about it. And he kept making some mistakes during the case. Like couple months into the case, he had his girlfriend stay at the Florida house, the family home where the kids kind of grew up, and their vacation home, and the neighbors told my client, and she was understandably super upset because this is all fresh and really raw. And then he texted her some sexy kind of message to my client, thinking it was the girlfriend. Really not cool. So she just kept getting mired back in the emotion again. Just when she'd start to recover, he would, jam her right back down and being angry. And what was great about the coaches was this kind of thing would happen right before one of our sessions. And the coaches would come in and say, look, let's take the first hour to defuse this and talk this through. And then the lawyers can come in and deal with the money and the the details. And because if we would have just come in the room cold, my client would just be yelling at the husband about what a knucklehead he was, and it wouldn't go anywhere. So they wouldn't make progress. So they worked beautifully to get them to cooperate and get the emotional stuff dealt with, which is important. And then they can think clearly about the financial, alimony, child support, and division of assets. And it worked very well. That case would have derailed without the coaches.
Just on that point, so I think, people might often assume collaborative law means the two of them have to be getting along and have to have some sort of an agreement in place. But actually, it's not necessarily to the contrary, but you don't have to have an agreement or get along to be able to get into this collaborative world.
That's exactly right. And we've had very contentious cases that were resolved collaboratively. The key is just being committed to the process. So if the parties don't have to get along well, but if they know that this way of getting divorced is better than court for them and their family, they'll make it through it. And it's generally shorter and less expensive, and oftentimes much less expensive. And it keeps the family in mind, and you come up with a custom solution that works for you and your spouse, soon to be ex, and the kids, much more so than you would with a litigated process where the judge ultimately is deciding what's going on in your case. And litigation is very, very expensive. Collaborative tries to get to the heart of the matter. And one of the things I like to talk about is a sort of a Venn diagram of settlement, where you imagine the two circles. In a traditional divorce case, the lawyers tend to start at the outer edge of the circle. That's each person's wishes. So they each aim to the moon, and they say, well, I want my best outcome. And collaborative lawyers and all lawyers know the outcome is somewhere in the middle. It's not your best day. And it's probably not your worst day either. And collaborative lawyers tend to get right to the heart of things instead of fooling around on the edges where everybody knows it's a fantasy. So it's a more efficient way of handling these cases. It's not suitable for every case, but it works well for a lot of cases. And we found it to be a very successful method of resolving divorce cases. The one thing I should mention too is we use financial neutrals in many cases. These are financial neutral folks trained as certified divorce financial analysts. They're CPAs, and these are people with the appropriate background to handle divorce cases. And they gather all the financial records, just one of them for a collaborative team. People submit all their financials to that person. They perform the financial investigation. Then they do the analysis. So that saves people a lot of money and time. And also there's a trust factor because it's not the other lawyer telling you about the finances. It's a neutral person telling you about the finances who has no axe to grind. So and they also generate solution scenarios like, well, what happens if the house goes this way, or if we sell the house, if we move retirement accounts this way or that way. And it's much more efficient than having each law firm collect documents, then exchange them, then try to make sense of them. You have one brain talking to both people, getting all the information, analyzing it, and coming up with reports for everyone. So it's a much more efficient way to handle divorce in general. I find it to be generally much better than mediation because you can handle complex issues. And with the right collaborative team, you can deal with very contentious cases in an efficient way. So I'm excited to talk in front of the group tomorrow. And my book, in a way, is a love letter to collaborative. It's certainly alternative dispute resolution. And there are times you have to have a trial, that there's no other way. And that's, in fact, the best way. But if you can avoid it and it's sensible, then this is a great opportunity. So check into collaborative. Look at Stu Webb's book. It's easy to find on Amazon. Check out my book. I have a chapter where I discuss litigation, collaborative, and mediation and the pros and cons. So those are all resources you can use to check this out. And there are collaborative law organizations in every state where you can look them up, like Collaborative Law Illinois is ours, and it provides the training and the sort of, you can't have officially certifications, but when you see somebody as part of that organization, you know they've had the training, and that sets them apart from people that have not had the training. Worth checking out. Moving on, Rahul, last topic is we've got to talk about dating trends, and we found one that had to talk about because we love these terms. Tell us about this next thing. What's the Soonicorn?
Yeah, Soonicorn, like unicorn, right? So a Soonicorn is sort of this amalgam of maybe too soon and or not soon enough or is going to happen soon and a unicorn. So the article from Pure Wow says that essentially describes this concept of a Soonicorn in dating, which is basically someone who is not ready for a relationship despite having potential. So the article goes on to suggest that if you're dating a Soonicorn, it's best to prioritize yourself and not hold on to hope for a future that may not come. It talks sort of about how in venture capitalism and startups, a unicorn Unicorn refers to a privately held company that's achieved $1 billion valuation or more, rapid growth, etc. In Soonicorn, it's sort of like, well, you look at this person, looks like perfect, but under the sort of facade, everything is amazing, but then you don't hear anything. He doesn't text back, or in this context, it says the guy doesn't text for a week or doesn't have enough on his debit card to foot the bill, etc. So it's one of those.
This is more of an emotional thing, meaning the person would be awesome if they were willing to commit, but they're not quite there yet? Or is this somebody who's going to financially blossom and be like, they're not yet going to be like a stable, financially successful person?
Both. So it's whether it's financial, emotional, or an ex who's not ready to let go yet. It's one of those where they're almost there, and it's sort of like the opposite of a golden retriever boyfriend, I guess, is what it kind of says. So
what's the golden retriever thing? I remember the term, but what's that?
They're eager to please and are emotionally available.
Okay. Then they talk about a black cat boyfriend, charming, mysterious, and just elusive enough to keep you wondering if he's really meant to be yours. Okay.
Yeah, spoiler, he might be, but it's not yet.
So I was definitely a Soonicorn when my first wife was willing to marry me, but I was 21 years old. I mean, you can't be any corn at that point. You're just getting rolled. I was a smile and a haircut, and I think I told her I was going to go to law school. That was about it. But you know, she already had a job. She was 2 years older than me. She was a teacher, and she was successful. So she placed a bet on me, and I really appreciate it now, and I certainly did then. We were married for 24 years. But so folks, the Soonicorns can work out pretty well. But it basically says, like, if they're not ready, consider other people. Otherwise, this is the long game. All right. Rahul, how can people contact you on social media?
You can look me up on LinkedIn or on Instagram at Chicago Divorce.
Awesome. And my name is Rayford Palmer, and I'm the author of I Just Want This Done, where we get the name of the podcast, How Smart, Successful People Get Divorced Without Losing Their Kids, Money, and Minds, available on Amazon, Kindle, Audible, and where all great ebooks are sold. I've got the fancy hardcover here. 4 years in print, still a bestseller, and got awesome reviews on Amazon. I think 116 reviews and 4.6 or something like that. So people love it beyond, not just my mom, by the way. So check it out on all formats. And we work at STG Divorce Law in Chicagoland. We serve Cook County and the Collier counties, the counties all surrounding Chicagoland or Chicago. And we handle divorce for smart, successful people. And our website is at stgdivorcelaw.com or stglawfirm.com. And I can be found at Rayford Palmer everywhere, TikTok, X, Instagram, and we have a private Facebook group, the Illinois Divorce Support Network. We have YouTube channel for the law firm. Our channel is at STG Divorce Law. We have lots of educational videos about divorce there. And our podcast website, which is also I Just Want This Done pod.com or podcast.com. And our podcast is on YouTube, of course, at I Just Want This Done Divorce Podcast. So check us out. We're on all the popular pod platforms. Please like, share, subscribe, and give us reviews, please. That helps the word get out about our show and keeps us motivated to work on the show in the future. We keep putting this out weekly. It comes out, the published show comes out on Fridays, typically midday. And that's a week after we record it. And that's what we're doing live right now. This show will be released a week from now. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day and be careful out there.